Verna Copeland stood on her front porch in Millbrook, Alabama, watching the street empty as the last trick-or-treaters rushed home. The jack-o'-lanterns on her neighbor's steps flickered in the October wind. She checked her watch. 9:30. Her daughter Brielle should have been home an hour ago. The candy bowl beside Verna sat untouched, her hands trembling as she dialed another mother's number. No answer. She tried another. Nothing. When she finally reached Diane Holt 3 houses down, the woman's voice cracked through the phone. "My son isn't home either." Verna's stomach dropped. She stepped into the street and saw what she hadn't noticed before. Every porch light on the block was on. Every front door stood open. Parents were spilling out into the road, calling names into the darkness, their voices climbing higher with each unanswered shout. Before we dive into what happened that night, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more shocking, true stories that'll keep you up at night. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. We want to connect with you. The police arrived within 20 minutes, but the chaos had already taken root. Officer Glenn Torrance stepped out of his cruiser and immediately knew this wasn't a prank or a misunderstanding. There were too many parents, too many missing children, too much terror carved into every face. He started taking names: Brielle Copeland, age 8, Marcus Holt, age 10, Tessa Farrelly, 6, Jonah Pritchett, 11. The list grew. 9 children, 12, 15. By the time every parent had checked in, 22 children had not come home. Torrance called for backup, and within an hour, the neighborhood swarmed with officers, flashlights cutting through the dark like desperate prayers. They swept through backyards, checked every shed and crawl space, knocked on every door whether the lights were on or not. Someone brought search dogs. The animals picked up trails immediately, all of them leading in the same direction: south, toward the old access road that dead-ended past the tree line where the county had planned to build new houses but never finished. The dogs followed the scent for half a mile before stopping cold at a wooden post driven into the dirt. The post held a weathered sign, the paint cracked and fading, but still visible. A white rabbit, painted years ago, smiling. The parents arrived minutes later, breathless and stumbling through the dark. Verna reached the sign first and fell to her knees in the dirt. She touched the painted rabbit with shaking fingers and felt her throat close. One of the fathers, a man named Cormac Lyle, grabbed a flashlight from an officer and swept it across the ground. There, small shoe prints in the dust, dozens of them, all sizes, sneakers, sandals, light-up shoes that left star-shaped patterns in the earth. The prints scattered in every direction from the post, but then just stopped, like the children had been lifted straight into the air. No tire tracks, no drag marks, no signs of struggle, just silence. Torrance stood at the edge of the search perimeter and stared into the black woods beyond. The wind carried something through the trees, something faint. He told himself it was an animal, a bird, anything but what it sounded like. But the other officers heard it too, and so did the parents. A soft sound, rhythmic, almost playful. It sounded like children laughing far away, deep in the dark. And then it stopped. Verna looked up at Torrance with eyes that had aged a decade in 2 hours. She asked the question every parent was thinking, but didn't want to say out loud. What took them? Torrance didn't answer. He didn't know how. He only knew that in all his years on the force, he had never seen anything like this. 22 children, gone, in one night, without a single witness who could explain what happened. except for one detail. One terrible detail that every parent had heard from the few kids who came home. The ones who were too scared to follow. They all said the same thing. A man in a dirty white rabbit costume had walked down the street just after dark, carrying a bag of candy. He didn't speak much. He just smiled. And when the children asked where he was going, he pointed down the road and said, "Better candy at the big house. Follow me." And they did. 3 weeks earlier, Millbrook had been the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked. The neighborhood sat on the eastern edge of town, 23 houses arranged in a horseshoe around a cul-de-sac. Most families had lived there for generations. The Copelands, the Holts, the Pritchetts. They knew each other's children, shared tools over fences, gathered for block parties every summer. Verna Copeland had grown up in the same house she was raising Brielle in now. She remembered trick-or-treating these same streets when she was 8 years old, her mother watching from the porch with a mug of cider. It had felt safe then. It still felt safe, now. That was the problem. Brielle was the kind of child who made friends with everyone. She wore her brown hair in 2 braids and had a gap between her front teeth that made her smile look mischievous, even when she wasn't trying. She loved Halloween more than Christmas. For weeks she had been planning her costume, changing her mind every few days. A witch, a pirate, a vampire. Finally, she settled on a black cat, complete with whiskers drawn on her cheeks with eyeliner. Verna had taken her to the craft store to pick out fabric for the tail. Brielle held it up in the car on the way home and said, "This is going to be the best Halloween ever, Mama." Verna smiled and said, "I know, baby, I know." But something had changed in Millbrook that October. Small things at first, things people noticed but didn't talk about. Diane Holt saw a man standing at the edge of the woods one afternoon while she was walking her dog. He wore a long coat, even though it was 70 degrees outside. When she called out to ask if he needed help, he turned and walked back into the trees without saying a word. Cormac Lyle found candy wrappers scattered across his front yard 3 mornings in a row. Bright wrappers, the expensive kind. No one on the block gave out candy like that. His son Marcus asked if he could keep them, and Cormac said no. Throw them away. Something about them felt wrong. Then there were the flyers. Plain white paper, no pictures, just words printed in black ink. They started appearing on telephone poles and mailboxes 2 weeks before Halloween. Have you seen the big house? Best candy in the county. Follow the rabbit. No address, no name, just those 3 lines. Most people tore them down and threw them away. Verna pulled one off her mailbox and studied it in her kitchen. Brielle leaned over her shoulder and asked what it meant. Verna crumpled it up and said, "Nothing, sweetheart, just someone's bad joke." But she didn't throw it away. She folded it into her junk drawer and tried not to think about it. The neighborhood kids talked about the big house at the bus stop. Marcus Holt said his older cousin told him it was an old mansion past the woods where a rich man gave out full-size candy bars and dollar bills. Tessa Farelli said her friend from school went there last year and came back with a pillowcase full of chocolate. Brielle asked Verna if they could go this year, and Verna said absolutely not. "We stay on our street. You don't go anywhere, I can't see you." Brielle pouted, but agreed. Verna thought that was the end of it. On Halloween morning, Verna walked Brielle to the bus stop like always. The air smelled like wood smoke, and someone's porch already had fake cobwebs stretched across the railings. Brielle bounced on her toes, too excited to stand still. She asked Verna what time they could start trick or treating, and Verna said 6 o'clock, right after dinner. The other kids were buzzing with the same energy. Marcus wore his superhero shirt under his jacket. Tessa carried a plastic pumpkin bucket even though school didn't allow costumes. They were all talking about their routes, which houses gave the best candy, how late they could stay out. Normal things. Happy things. Verna watched the bus pull away and waved until Brielle's face disappeared behind the tinted windows. She didn't know it would be the last normal morning she would ever have. That night, just after sunset, the white rabbit appeared. The sun dropped behind the tree line at 5:45. Verna helped Brielle into her black cat costume in the living room, pinning the tail to her pants and adjusting the ears on her headband. Brielle looked at herself in the hallway mirror and grinned. Verna's chest tightened with something she couldn't name. Pride, maybe, or fear disguised as love. She made Brielle promise one more time. Stay where I can see you. Don't leave the block. Come home by 8:30. Brielle rolled her eyes but nodded. I know, Mama. I promise. Verna kissed her forehead and opened the front door. The street was already filling with children. Marcus Holt wore a silver cape and a mask that covered half his face. Tessa Forelli was dressed as a fairy with wings that sparkled under the streetlights. Jonah Pritchett had fake blood smeared across a torn shirt, his zombie makeup so realistic it made the younger kids nervous. They gathered in clusters, comparing costumes, shaking their empty candy bags like they couldn't wait another second. Parents stood on porches with cameras, calling out reminders. Stay together, watch for cars, be polite, the usual things, the safe things. Verna watched Brielle run to join Marcus and Tessa at the mailbox. She told herself to relax. This was Millbrook. Nothing bad happened here. The first 2 hours went exactly as planned. The children moved house to house in a noisy parade, their laughter echoing off the pavement. Verna stood on her porch and handed out candy to the younger trick-or-treaters, keeping one eye on Brielle's black cat ears bobbing down the sidewalk. Diane Holt waved from across the street. Cormac Lyle sat on his front steps with a bowl of chocolate bars, watching his son lead the pack. Everything felt normal. Everything felt right. And then the white rabbit turned the corner. He came from the south end of the street, where the road curved toward the woods. At first, people thought he was just another parent in costume, maybe someone trying to make the kids laugh, but something about him felt off. The costume was old, not vintage old, dirty old. The white fabric had gone gray in places, stained with something dark around the cuffs. The head was too big, the eyes too wide, the smile painted across the face frozen in a way that didn't look friendly up close. He carried a black duffel bag over one shoulder and walked slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. The children noticed him immediately. A few of the younger ones stopped and stared. Marcus whispered something to Jonah, and they both laughed nervously. The rabbit didn't go to any houses. He just walked down the center of the street, his footsteps silent on the asphalt. When he reached the cul-de-sac, he stopped and set the duffel bag down. Then he opened it. Inside were candy bars, the big kind, full-size Hershey bars, Snickers, Reese's cups still in their wrappers, the kind of candy most houses couldn't afford to give out. He held one up, and a little girl in a princess costume ran over. Her mother called after her, but the girl was already taking the candy, her eyes wide with excitement. More children came. Brielle hesitated at first, but when she saw Marcus and Tessa walking toward the rabbit, she followed. Verna watched from the porch, her hand tightening on the bowl of candy in her lap. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't name it. The rabbit wasn't doing anything bad. He was just handing out candy. That was all. But her stomach twisted anyway. She set the bowl down and started walking toward the street. The rabbit knelt down so he was eye level with the children. His voice was muffled behind the mask, but loud enough to carry. You want the good stuff? Real candy? There's a big house just down the road, more than you can carry. He pointed south toward the access road. The children looked at each other. A few of them started to walk in that direction. Verna broke into a run. Brielle, stop. Come back here right now. But Brielle didn't hear her. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She was already 10 feet down the road, following Marcus and Tessa, following the white rabbit who walked ahead of them with his bag swinging at his side. Other parents started shouting. Diane sprinted off her porch. Cormac grabbed his son by the arm, but Marcus pulled away, laughing like it was a game. The rabbit kept walking. The children kept following. 22 of them in total. Their candy bags bouncing, their costumes bright under the streetlights. And then they reached the edge of the neighborhood where the lights ended and the road turned to dirt. The rabbit stepped into the darkness. And one by one, so did the children. By the time Verna reached the spot where the pavement ended, they were gone. The search went through the night. Helicopters arrived at midnight, their spotlights sweeping across the woods in bright circles that revealed nothing but empty trees and dead leaves. The dogs lost the scent after the rabbit sign and refused to go further. One handler said his German shepherd had never acted like that before, whining and pulling backward like something invisible was blocking the path. Officer Torrance organized the parents into groups, gave them flashlights and radios, told them to stay together and call out every few minutes. Verna walked until her legs shook. She screamed Brielle's name until her voice cracked and bled. The other parents did the same. Their cries echoed through the dark like ghosts calling to ghosts. But no one answered. By dawn, the news crews had arrived. Vans with satellite dishes parked along the main road, reporters in clean jackets standing in front of cameras, their faces serious and practiced. Missing children, Halloween night, Alabama neighborhood. The story spread fast. By noon, it was national. Verna sat in her kitchen and watched herself on television, her face pale and hollow, her voice shaking as she begged whoever took Brielle to bring her home. Please, she's only 8. She's scared of the dark. Just bring her back. The screen cut to footage of the search teams, then to the rabbit sign, then to a specialist in a suit talking about abduction statistics. Verna turned it off and put her head in her hands. The FBI arrived on the second day. They set up a command center in the elementary school gym, brought in computers and maps and people in dark suits who asked the same questions over and over. Did you see anyone suspicious in the neighborhood before Halloween? Did your daughter mention meeting anyone new? Did she seem scared of anything? Verna answered until the words stopped making sense. No, no, no. She didn't know anything. None of them did. The agents interviewed every parent, every neighbor, every kid who had been on the street that night but came home. The stories matched. A man in a white rabbit costume, dirty, old, quiet. He promised better candy. He pointed toward the woods, and the children followed. One detail stood out. A boy named Eric Monroe, age 6, had started to follow the rabbit but turned back when his older sister grabbed his hand. He told the agents the rabbit smelled bad, like dirt and old water, and when the rabbit leaned down to give him candy, Eric saw his eyes through the costume. They weren't normal, he said. They didn't blink. His mother tried to shush him, but the agents wrote it down. Another girl, 9 years old, said she heard the rabbit humming while he walked, a tune she didn't recognize, slow and sad, like a lullaby. The agents searched the woods with ground-penetrating radar and infrared cameras. They dug around the rabbit sign and found nothing but rocks and clay. They pulled records on every registered sex offender within 100 miles. They checked traffic cameras and gas station footage and interviewed truck drivers who used the access road. Nothing. No white vans. No suspicious vehicles. No evidence that anyone had been there at all, except for the footprints in the dust. 22 pairs of small shoes, leading nowhere. Torrance spent his nights at the command center, drinking cold coffee and studying maps until his vision blurred. There was something about the sign that bothered him, the painted rabbit. He asked the county records office for information on the land. Turns out the area had been privately owned until 15 years ago. A man named Wendell Cray bought 60 acres back in the 80s and built a house deep in the woods. Locals called it the Big House because it had 3 stories and a wraparound porch. Cray lived alone, kept to himself, died in 2003. The property went to the county after his estate went unpaid. The house was supposed to be demolished, but the crew never finished. Budget cuts. The structure was still there, abandoned, rotting, half a mile past the rabbit sign. Torrance looked at the map and felt his blood turn cold. He grabbed his radio and called for backup. They were going to the big house, and they were going now. Verna heard the news an hour later. They found something. She ran to her car barefoot, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Let them be alive," she whispered. "Please, let them be alive." The big house stood at the end of a trail, so overgrown the officers had to cut through vines and brambles to reach it. The structure leaned to one side, like something had tried to pull it into the earth. The porch sagged. The windows were dark and broken. Paint peeled off the siding in long strips that curled like dead skin. Torrance stood at the edge of the clearing and stared. This was it. This was where the rabbit had been leading them. He signaled for his team to spread out and approached the front door with his weapon drawn. The door hung open on one hinge. Inside, the air smelled like rot and mildew and something else, something sweet and chemical that made Torrance's eyes water. He stepped into the front hall and swept his flashlight across the walls. Old furniture covered in dust, faded wallpaper, a staircase that disappeared into darkness on the second floor. And then he saw them, the candy wrappers, dozens of them scattered across the floor like confetti. Bright colors, Hershey, Snickers, Reese's, the same candy the rabbit had been handing out. Torrance's radio crackled. "Sir, you need to see this." He followed the voice to the kitchen. The table was set for children. 22 plates, 22 cups, 22 chairs pulled up close like someone had been expecting guests. The plates were empty, but the cups still had liquid in them. Dark red liquid that looked like fruit punch, but smelled wrong. Torrance didn't touch it. He called for the forensics team and moved deeper into the house. The search team found more wrappers in the living room, a black duffel bag in the corner, and upstairs in the largest bedroom, they found the costume. The white rabbit suit laid across the bed like something that had been carefully folded and put away. The fabric was stiff with dirt and stains. The head sat on the pillow, its painted smile staring at the ceiling. But no children, no bodies, no sign of where they had gone. Verna arrived as the sun climbed higher, pushing past the officers at the perimeter. She saw the house, and her knees buckled. Diane caught her. Cormac stood frozen, staring at the structure like he was looking at his own grave. The agents wouldn't let them inside. Too dangerous, they said. possible evidence. But Verna didn't care about evidence. She cared about Brielle. She screamed her daughter's name at the broken windows. She begged the walls to give her back what they had taken, but the house stayed silent. The forensics team worked for 2 days. They tested the liquid in the cups and found traces of a sedative. Enough to make a child sleep, but not enough to kill. They found fingerprints on the plates and the duffel bag, but they didn't match anyone in the system. They analyzed the rabbit costume and discovered fibers that dated back decades, stitching patterns that hadn't been used since the 1970s. The suit was old, older than Wendell Cray, older than the house itself, and in the basement, behind a false wall, they found a tunnel. Hand-dug. Narrow. It ran under the house and out toward the woods, the walls shored up with rotting timber and rusted nails. The tunnel went on for 30 yards before it collapsed into itself, filled with dirt and stones and roots that had grown through the ceiling. No way through, no way to know where it had once led. The agents declared the house a crime scene, but admitted they had no leads, no suspect, no clear explanation for what happened. The children were gone, all 22 of them, vanished like they had never existed at all. The parents returned to Millbrook and waited. Days turned into weeks. The news crews left. The search teams packed up. The FBI closed the case as an ongoing investigation with no active suspects. And the neighborhood fell into a silence so heavy it felt like drowning. Verna stopped sleeping. She sat in Brielle's room every night, holding her daughter's stuffed animals, whispering promises into the dark. "I'll find you, baby. I won't stop looking." But deep down, in the place where hope goes to die, she knew the truth. Brielle wasn't coming home. 6 months passed. Winter came and buried Millbrook under snow that made everything look clean and new. But the neighborhood underneath was broken beyond repair. Half the families moved away. The ones who stayed kept their curtains drawn and their doors locked even in daylight. The for sale signs stood in yards like grave markers. Verna refused to leave. She couldn't abandon the place where she had last seen Brielle. She walked the woods every day, following paths that led nowhere, calling a name that no one answered. The police told her to stop. It wasn't safe. It wasn't healthy. But Verna didn't care about safe anymore. Then in late April, something changed. Verna woke at 3 a.m. to a sound outside her window. Soft at first, almost like wind chimes. But when she sat up and listened closer, she realized it was laughter. Children's laughter. Her heart stopped. She threw off the blankets and ran to the window. The street was empty. The streetlights buzzed and flickered. But the sound continued. Coming from the woods, Verna grabbed her coat and flashlight and ran barefoot into the dark. She followed the laughter down the old access road, past the rabbit sign that still stood like a sentinel in the dirt. Her lungs burned. Her feet bled. But she didn't stop. The sound grew louder as she reached the clearing where the big house had stood. Except the house was gone. The agents had demolished it 2 months ago, hauled away the timber, and filled in the basement. Nothing remained but scorched earth and a depression in the ground where the foundation had been. And standing in the center of that empty space were the children. All 22 of them. Brielle, Marcus, Tessa, Jonah, all of them, wearing the same costumes they had disappeared in. Their candy bags clutched in their hands, they stood in a circle, perfectly still, their faces turned toward Verna, like they had been waiting for her. Verna's flashlight slipped from her hand. She stumbled forward, her mouth open but no sound coming out. Brielle smiled, the same gap-toothed smile, the same black cat ears, "Mama," she said, "we found the big house. It had the best candy, just like he promised." Verna reached for her daughter, but stopped. Something was wrong. Brielle's eyes were different. All of their eyes were different. Too bright, too clear, like glass reflecting light that wasn't there. The other parents came crashing through the trees behind Verna. Diane, Cormac, all of them. They saw their children and fell apart, sobbing and reaching and trying to understand. But the children didn't move. They just stood there, smiling, their bags full of candy that smelled sweet and rotten at the same time. Marcus spoke next, his voice flat and distant. "We stayed at the big house. It was so fun. We played games. We ate candy. We didn't want to come back, but he said we had to. He said it was time." Cormac grabbed his son's shoulders. Who said that?" Marcus's smile widened. "The rabbit. He takes care of us. He always has. He always will." And then, as if on cue, all 22 children turned their heads toward the woods, towards something the parents couldn't see, something waiting in the dark beyond the trees. Verna pulled Brielle close and felt her daughter's body, cold, too cold, like she had been kept somewhere without warmth, without light. The medical exams would confirm it later. The children were alive, but changed. They had no memory of where they had been, no injuries, no trauma. But they didn't sleep anymore. They didn't laugh like they used to. And sometimes, late at night, parents would find them standing at windows, staring toward the woods, whispering about the big house like it was a place they missed, a place they wanted to return to. Millbrook never celebrated Halloween again. The neighborhood association voted to ban it. No decorations, no costumes, no trick or treating. On October 31st every year, the streets stayed dark and the houses stayed locked. But deep in the woods, past the rabbit sign, past the place where the big house used to stand, people still reported hearing laughter. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind died down, you could see a figure at the edge of the trees, tall, white, watching, waiting, because the rabbit never really left. He just went back to wherever he came from, and he took something from those children that they would never get back. Verna kept Brielle close for the rest of her life, but she knew the truth. She had gotten her daughter's body back, but whatever made Brielle who she was, whatever light had lived behind those eyes, had stayed in the big house, and it was never coming home. If this story stayed with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true mysteries that'll haunt you long after you stop watching, because some things that go missing never truly return, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.